everybody. Welcome back. How are you doing? Let me know in the comments. Here's your trivia question for the day. The 2024 Olympics take place in Paris this summer. Where did the Olympic Games actually originate? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIP and we may feature it on our feed. Okay, so I will reveal the response at the end of our segment, of course. And for now, let's start our show. Interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand a little bit more about the CELPIP test. So if you're about to write the test, or if you know somebody else who's about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon, or let them know to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon so you can be notified as soon as we go live. So in today's episode, we're exploring strategies that can help you improve your vocabulary. So we have a previous episode where we did this to help you with your reading test. And then this time we'll be focusing on your speaking skills. So this will, of course, help you perform better in your speaking test for the CELPIP test, but also just generally it'll help you perform better in your day-to-day conversations. So without further ado, let's welcome our favorite instructor. Hi, Brandon.
Hello. Hi, welcome. It's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me. I always look forward to our Thursday morning episodes.
Great. So we actually have quite a few people who joined us today, so I'm just going to let you get started.
Perfect. Yeah, I see we've got lots of people and also saying hello into the chat. I also saw some people answering the question for the trivia, so we'll reveal the answer there at the end. So like Ashwati said, we're going to focus a bit more on some vocabulary development today because it's a hot topic. Lots of you've got questions about how you can improve your vocabulary. So we're going to focus on the CELPIP speaking test today as it applies to the vocab. Now, when you take your CELPIP test, by the way, you will be sitting in one test room. There will probably be about 25 or 30 other people in that same test sitting. But you can imagine yourself sitting at your own computer workstation. You will be wearing a headset with a microphone attached, and you're going to be speaking aloud and recording your voice into that microphone. That's how you'll complete the entire CELPIP speaking test. It's the recordings that you make that are going to be listened to later on by the raters. These are human raters, at least 3 of them. And they're listening to your recordings so that they can assess 4 particular skill areas. We call them dimensions, and they're listed here on the left of your screen. So first of all, the raters will listen to see what your content details are all about. They're hoping for some interesting details. They are going to assess vocabulary, which is what we're here to talk more about today. Your listenability skills are also assessed. So this is your speech presentation, things like pronunciation and so on. And finally, task fulfillment will be examined. So the raters need to make sure you've answered that question fully. So for today's episode, we're only going to focus on the vocabulary section of this checklist. The other 3 areas are important, but we'll cover those in another episode. Today, let's just focus on vocab. So you can see some factors here on the right-hand side. Step 1, when you're building your vocabulary for the test, is you want to make sure that you're selecting words as you speak that are suitable. They need to make sense and they need to be natural so that the listener fully understands your meaning. That would be step 1. Step 2, the raters are hoping to hear from you a pretty wide variety of vocabulary words. So they simply want you to change it up. They don't want you to just repeat the same words over and over. Step 3 would be the icing on the cake, I call it, which is the final step. And one of the more important ones, I think, to help you achieve a higher score. The raters are looking for you to include precise vocabulary language. This is a really strong way to earn at least a level 9 on your CELPIP speaking test, if you can use more consistent, precise language. So to show you what I mean by precision, as it is an important skill, I'm going to show you a word on screen here on the left of this chart. The word is building. So if you can imagine right now, I'm looking out my window right now, and I say to all of you listening, I'm looking at a building. And in your mind, you're having a hard time picturing exactly what it is I'm looking at. All you know is that it's a building, but a building could be 10 different things off the top of my head. So using words like building that are very general, that don't give us a lot of detail, we would call this type of language quite vague, quite simple, quite common. And using words like this on the test are not going to help us achieve the highest score maybe that we would like. So can I ask all of you to think right now, just off the tops of your heads, maybe look out your window. If there's a building nearby, can you please tell us in the chat box precisely the type of building you're looking at? And while your ideas are coming in, I'll give you an example of what I mean here by precise. So right down the road from me, if I crook my head a little bit further this way, there's actually an elementary school. So if I were to now say to you, I'm looking out my window and I see an elementary school. In your minds, you can already start to picture what that would look like. So elementary school is an example of a word that's so much more precise and detailed and interesting than just using that simple word building. So I'm wondering, I'll have to rely on Ashwati to share your answers aloud as I can't see the chat box as I'm presenting. But Ashwati, do we have anybody that suggested a precise type of building yet in the chat box there?
Yeah, we have a couple suggestions. So one of them is a 10-story building. That's one suggestion.
Okay.
And there is apartment.
Excellent.
And then somebody said hotel building.
Excellent. Yeah.
We have townhouse. Then we have 4-story residential building.
Perfect. Yeah. And we don't even have to use the word building in the title. If you see a hotel, it's just a hotel. We don't even have to say hotel building. So all of those examples definitely give more detail. Even if you're going to keep the word building as part of your idea, by adding in 10-story building or 10-story apartment building, you're still adding a little bit more detail, which is what the raters are hoping you'll do because it makes your idea so much more interesting and detailed. So I'm just going to quickly show you some other examples of types of buildings, but more precise word choices. So I'd already shared elementary school. I was also thinking of apartment building, but I was trying to be a little fancy with my word choice today. And I went with condominium tower. So that's a high level way to express that same idea. A condo is like an apartment that you would own. And the word condo is short for condominium. That might be a new word for some of you today, as a matter of fact. So using words like that on your CELPIP test would be quite advanced, to be honest. Shopping mall. Shopping mall is maybe not as interesting as condominium tower, but it's still a lot more precise than just saying building. So again, maybe in your day-to-day conversation, sure, but especially on CELPIP, you want to be precise with your word choice, as it will help you to score better under the vocabulary section that the raters are looking for. Let's do one more example because you are going to see people in pictures on your CELPIP speaking test. So when you're trying to describe a scene, like you will have to do in speaking task 3, if you keep on saying the person or the people or the person over here and the person over there, it doesn't give us any detail at all. Again, I could look outside right now and I live on the 9th floor of my apartment building. I do see down on the street there, I see a person walking by. But when I say person to you, you have no idea what I'm looking at or who I'm looking at. So we want to be more precise. So again, if I can open it up to all of you watching, if you've got examples think of job titles. So what kind of people would we encounter in our day-to-day community, so to speak? So I'll give you an example as some of your ideas are coming into the chat box. Off the top of my head, my sister actually is a university professor. She teaches at a college here in Vancouver where we both live. So that's an idea that comes to my mind immediately because it's based on my own life experience, right? My sister is a university professor. So maybe you would like to cite right now your job title. I guess I could do that for me. I am an online instructor. So that's another example of a precise type of a person, if you will, or job title. Do we have any suggestions, Ashwati, from our crowd today?
Yes. So our first one is tall man walking. I think that's
okay.
Then we have lady. Then we have young man.
Okay.
Then we have police officer, firefighter, personal trainer, doctor. So I guess uniforms, people who wear uniforms and you can identify them. Then we have construction employee. Then we have teacher, waiter, cleaner. Then we have bank manager.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, doctor.
Excellent. Excellent. So I noticed a few things. I'll share. I had a small list as well. I also thought of taxi cab drivers because I see taxis all the time in the downtown area, which is near where I live. And I also thought of security guard. Don't think that was mentioned by you, but there's a Shoppers Drug Mart just down the road from where I live. And I always see a security guard out front there when I walk in. So again, a lot of your ideas right now are probably coming from your own personal experience. These are maybe people that you see on a day-to-day existence as you're milling about with your own lives. And this is a lot of the time where our vocab development begins. So we are basically forced to learn, if we want to communicate, we're forced to learn the words that are going to help us in our environment. So on your speaking test, it's extremely helpful to use words also that are rooted in your own background experience if you've got them. All right, to be as precise as possible. So I thought what we do is take that little mini practice we've just done, looking at what precise language looks like. And we're going to now apply it to an actual CELPIP speaking test question. So I chose this question for task 8, partly just because I thought it was a fun question to get into today. It's one that we've never seen here before as a group. So I'll read it out to you first just to set the stage. So this was once upon a time a real test question. Keep that in mind. It's no longer live. You'll never see it again. But once upon a time, some people had this for their CELPIP test. So it says here, you are in an art gallery and see a nice painting. Your friend Nico is looking for a painting for his new coffee shop. Call Nico and describe in detail what the painting looks like and ask him if he would consider buying it for his shop. Okay, so this is a typical task 8. You're given a role play situation. So for the purposes of our practice today, I know on the real test, you would speak for 1 full minute and you would have to address the 3 parts here. You have to call your friend, describe the painting, and ask the friend if he wants to buy it. I'm going to skip over the intro and the outro for this question today. What I'd like us to focus on right now for our vocabulary development is simply the part of this question that asks us to describe what the painting looks like. So to that end, I'm going to make the painting quite a bit bigger so we can see it with ease here. And we as a group as well are going to brainstorm some precise vocabulary words that we might use if this was our CELPIP test question. So looking at this painting that's been given to us on this test, I would argue there are probably 3 prominent parts. So once we get past the colors in the background, there are 3 main objects or parts of the scene. So let's start with the building. So here we go. We've already talked about buildings before. You're now looking at this particular building. If you were answering this question on the test and you had to describe to Nico, your friend, what this building looks like, what are some words that come to your mind? So again, think about that. Maybe offer some suggestions into the chat box. We're looking for precise examples of buildings, but this time the building has to match the picture we're looking at. We can't just name any old building. It has to be logical. So any ideas coming in there yet, Ashwati?
They're coming. But I just have to say, all my spatial design education just came like rushing in through my head because I know specifically what those things are called. Okay, anyway, I'll share what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing the building next to the river. It seems like the mosque. And then there is another one, cathedral by the river, boats on the river, clouds in the sky. We have castle, mosque, and monument.
Awesome. I'm very, very impressed. You know what's funny is I was thinking, as I was also in my head brainstorming, here's a small list of words that I came up with earlier. I was along the lines of a place of worship. I was thinking church and cathedral. For whatever reason, that word mosque never came to me. And I love that idea. I think mosque is so much more interesting and precise and descriptive than, say, church. So excellent ideas. I'll also point out that on a test question like this, when you're describing the painting, more than one approach or more than one idea is acceptable. If I think this is a bell tower, for example, and you think it's a mosque, I think both of those ideas would be perfectly acceptable on the test because looking at the building itself, it could be one of those 2 things. So you don't need to stress out so much about getting a right answer or a wrong answer, provided the words that you're selecting make sense and are suitable in this case. So I think all of these would work. Yeah, nicely done there. Nicely done. Does this, I know Ashwati says it reminds her of her design skills. What city does this look like to you? Just for fun. Does anybody have a sense of where this could be in the world? It's just a made up painting, but does it remind you of somewhere maybe you've traveled? I don't know if Ashwati's been there too.
This is exactly like my hometown, like my well, not my hometown, but my ancestral hometown. That I sat here. So
Interesting. What's the name of the town, Ashwati?
oh, my ancient home. So my parents and my grandparents, they grew up in a state called Kerala in India, and these boats. Well, I don't know if there is a monument. There could be, but like these boats are very very reminiscent of where they're from. But I've been to this location. So somebody says Turkey, and that's actually quite like I can see because of this. Like I've seen the Hagia Sophia, and that looks like this. So yes,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
says Delhi.
Okay.
Then there's Rome,
Okay.
and then there is Istanbul, which is Turkey, Hungary. So a lot of European.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's Venice.
Yes, Venice. I was just going to say, my very first backpacking trip ever. I love to travel, but in the year 2000, way back, I went to Italy, my first stop. And in Venice, this is exactly what I thought of the moment I saw this. So the point I'm making here is whatever city this looks like to you, based on maybe you grew up there, or partly like what Ashwati's saying, or you have at least visited, use that information as you're trying to determine what you're looking at. So maybe these ideas of having mosques and so on, as you've seen them throughout parts of Turkey and other parts of the world, that's where a lot of our vocab generation comes from. So we learn those words first, but then again, when you're completing a test like your CELPIP, use that knowledge to be interesting in your descriptions. So this is a really important strategy that's overlooked. Use what you know to describe a scene, as you will have to do on your CELPIP test. Excellent work there. I'd like to move over to this fellow right here. So again, looking at this painting, we've really only got the building, that one person there, and the boats as far as the objects. So maybe, can we focus on this person? I think it's a man, but those two words are very general. They're not very interesting. So instead of just referring to a person or a man, is there another word we could use to describe this person's job, if you will? Let's try to be interesting, descriptive, and precise. So think about what this man is doing on that boat. What is his job, perhaps? And that might give you some ideas as to how you might describe him.
Okay, so we have some suggestions. Actually, we do have a suggestion, I think, that you probably look for later, so I'm not going to share that yet. But we have, just for the occupation, we have fishermen, we have boatmen, fishermen, boatsmen.
Yep.
Yep.
I had
Fishing.
boatmen as well. Fishing,
Coxswain.
sorry.
Coxswain.
Cool. So one of you has rowing experience, because that's what a coxswain is. And it kind of fits into where I was going with this too. I thought a boatman, that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then I started thinking about boat merchant to get fancy. I think I had watched an online news podcast, and there was something to do with the boat traffic and trade around the world. So that idea was in my mind. But I myself too, I used to do some rowing, canoeing, and dragon boating 20 years ago when I first moved to Vancouver. So all of those ideas as well, my own life experience sort of guided me towards oars person. So whichever one of you said coxswain probably have some rowing experience, because you would need to know the sport of rowing to have that vocabulary word. So please use that to your benefit as you're answering these questions. I came up with the word gondolier, and I'm wondering, that idea you skipped, Ashwati, for the boat. What was that one? Let's go to that one next.
No, so there was somebody. So somebody did say gondolier. He is a gondolier, but the idea that I skipped was like a longer sentence, kind of like describing more than just the person. So that was this: the mosque on the bank of the river at the backdrop of dusk in Bangladesh.
Wow, very descriptive. So if I was Nico on the phone, I would have a better sense of what you're looking at. So that's great. The word gondolier is a person who literally drives or operates a gondola. So that brings us to the next step here. So again, if you've been, this is Venice. For me, remember, I thought this was a picture of Venice. And just when I was there in Venice, that's what you do as a tourist. You go into a gondola boat, and the gondolier is the person that takes you on the boat, and they steer you up and down the canals there. So this might be a gondola to you if you know that word. If you didn't know what a gondola was, are there other words you might use to describe the boat? Boat is sort of your first choice. It's the basic step, but could we step it up a little bit to be more interesting? What type of boat might this be?
We're still getting suggestions on his profession. So we're getting sailor, we're getting skipper. We're getting captain.
Perfect.
I'll see if we have any other description for the boat itself.
Yeah, like if he's the sailor or the captain, you could say he's the captain of the boat, or he's the steersperson for the. So think of it that way. Maybe combine those ideas because we've got his profession.
We have fishing boat as an option.
Okay. I was
We
thinking the
have-
same thing when you said fisherman. I thought, why not make it a fishing boat then? That would make sense to me. Yeah, I like
we
it.
have wooden boat. That's interesting.
Yes,
Um,
yeah. Okay.
There's a canoe.
Could be. It's maybe a special kind of canoe. Yeah, canoes normally don't have the rounded edges, but it's somewhat precise, somewhat accurate. Maybe not the best choice.
Houseboat slash canoe. Yeah,
Nice.
that's what we have so
Nice.
far.
Okay. I like those ideas better. I was thinking gondola. If you couldn't think of the name of the boat, I even thought maybe it could be a water taxi. We don't know. I know in different parts of the world, you travel around the waterways. And in Vancouver, where I live, we have water taxis that run us back and forth between the island and the mainland. Or even just ferry boat might work.
Yeah,
That's
like
a bit
ferry
more accurate. Yeah, that maybe is a bit more accurate. But again, the point is you've got lots of choice and you're basing this a lot on your own experience and on your own interpretation. I think too, understanding what one part of a picture would look like helps you figure out the second part, because we had so many more ideas for what the man is doing, whether he's a fisherman or a sailor or a captain. And then some of us struggled to name the boat. But if he's a fisherman, why not suggest he's steering a fishing boat, right? If that idea is there, just use it and move on, because we need to
have
keep
somebody who shared a personal experience. I found the same boat in Kashmir, India, and the boat name is Shikara boat.
Ooh, okay. I don't know that word, but that's amazing. I'm going to have to look that up when I get off. I love that. If you could
They're
use
beautiful. They're filled with flowers. You should definitely look them up. They're
that.
so beautiful.
Beautiful.
I mean, I haven't personally had the opportunity to see it in real life, but it's pretty well depicted on TV and movies and stuff.
Excellent. And if you used a word like that, it would be amazing on a test. Again, if it was a real life situation and you describe this to your friend, you can imagine how he could picture it in his mind. So with our own brainstorm, like that's how we might approach this question and describe it ourselves. What I'd like to do next is have a look at or listen to 4 different test takers who also describe the painting in their own way. I'm going to start off with a level 6 test taker, and we're going to work our way steadily up until we reach level 12. So we'll have a good opportunity to see how we sort of start off at an almost entry level with our vocab. Level 6 would be about a middle or high beginner. And then as we step it up, as we go towards the advanced vocab, you're going to notice that the vocabulary will become more precise, more specific, detailed, interesting, and even the words we're choosing to describe these elements might not even just be a single word anymore. They might be actually several words in a group that's going to give us detail. So that's how we're building or scaffolding these skills. So as I play for you this woman's speech, I've got the transcript on the screen so we can follow along. Can you please really focus on the 2 words in particular she uses to describe the building as well as the boat, since those are the ones that we've looked at. Let's just compare what we came up with to what she was able to come up with too. So here's her response.
The painting of the majority color is yellow, and there is a palace in the middle of the painting, and there is some like boat to the front side of the picture. There is a like lake front of the palace,
and so on. So again, I just played you a small 25-second clip of the entire answer so we could describe. So having a look there at the words that describe her depiction of the building, I actually like her word. None of us came up with it, but it makes sense to me as well. So she considered this building to be a palace. So I would say that that is actually a very good example of a precise vocabulary word that's used. She couldn't come up with anything descriptive for the boat, so she just went with boat. And I'll suggest to all of you as well that if you can't think on the spot of a more interesting word, sometimes it's okay just to go with the basics. It's better than nothing is what we're saying. So if this is a boat to you, then it's a boat, and move the speech along. But hopefully with practice, we can start to think of more descriptive words. With that aside, so we've looked at the building, the boat. Are there other words in this woman's speech that jump out to you as words that you think are extra interesting? Maybe if you could share one example in the chat box. So just sort of read over the few sentences on screen. And if you had to pick out, say, one word that demonstrated her best vocabulary, which word do you think you would pick? So let's make sure we all understand what interesting or precise language looks like as we're trying to figure out what we want to do in our own speech, our own test. So what jumps out to you here? Give it a second and see if you can identify a word or two that you think is used well enough. And again, it's level 6, so maybe you don't see as many examples as you could in other responses. What do you think? I've got a few I'll show you in a second, but let's hear what you have to say first.
Hi. We're still getting responses, but I just wanted to say that somebody commented saying that, is that what level 6 looks like? Then 6 is easy.
Okay. Remember, I should qualify. We're only looking at vocab. So there are other elements that go into your score. Yeah. So you still have to look at things like grammar, sentence structure, detail, tone, and so on. So yeah, there are other elements to consider. Her pronunciation was okay too, but could have been a bit better. Anyway, glad you
Okay,
find
so
it.
we have some suggestions coming in. I actually thought of a word and I'm waiting for somebody to bring up that word. But we have majority color as one of the phrases, and then we have the color yellow.
Okay.
Majority color is another option. Then there's picture. And then there is sunset time.
Okay, she didn't say sunset that I see though.
This is a word that she said. I guess that's your question, right? Yeah, lakefront. I thought lakefront was a good.
Yeah. So the lake is in front of the palace. So yeah. So the lake itself, again, if I was asked to answer this question, the lake is the first word that comes to my mind. You'd almost have to think a little harder. Could it be a canal? Perhaps we could maybe do a bit better. I think lake's acceptable. I loved the word majority, and I was hoping somebody would suggest it because somebody the point I'm going to make now. Sorry?
Yeah. Somebody did say majority color. 2 people said it.
Yeah, exactly. So the word majority all by itself, as I just highlighted it here in green, the word majority is a very interesting high-level word choice, and that's great. But in this case, the woman has not chosen this word and used it correctly. It doesn't make sense to say the majority color. What she should have said, if this was to be suitable and natural, would be the dominant color. So we know what she means. We know that she means that most of this painting is yellow. That's what majority means. It means most of. But even though the word majority is high level, it's not been used naturally here. So the point I'm making on your CELPIP is, yes, you want to be descriptive with your language, but you have to select words that actually make sense and are used well. So this is not an example of a word that's been used accurately. So that wouldn't help her score out as much as we would have hoped is all. And again, painting and lake are they're solid word choices, but there are maybe other words we could do a little bit better. But for level 6, I think we're off to a good start. Sorry, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? This is my question.
Sure.
But I feel like it might help the people who are watching. So like, let's say, because we're talking, right? Like this is not something that we can backtrack and erase. So let's say we've come to, like, let's say I'm saying, I've started my test and I'm saying the painting of the majority, like let's say I've used the word majority already.
Right.
And I've clocked that, okay, this is not the right word, but I've used it. So is there a way for me to then I think the better solution, would you agree, is to transform the sentence to say that the majority of the color used in this painting is yellow, but that's still, you know what I'm saying? Like if I've used the word majority, how do I fix it?
You have a couple of choices. If you notice right away that you've chosen the wrong word, and the same goes if you've made a grammar mistake or something. If this was me and I said, the painting of the majority color, and you realize that wasn't right, you could pause for just a second, think about the correct word, and just self-correct on the spot. So it might sound like this. The painting of the majority color, the dominant color, is yellow, and there is a palace. Keep your speech moving forward. So it's okay to make some of these little self-adjustments now and then. It won't damage your score too much, provided you're only doing that sparingly. But if you're interrupting yourself and constantly correcting yourself all the way through, it's really going to negatively affect your listenability score because you're interrupting the flow and the rhythm of the piece. So yeah, I think that's a great question, Ashwati, and I'm glad you've asked it because it's good for test takers to know. I think in natural speech, oftentimes we will catch ourselves choosing the wrong word, and you can self-correct. It's okay to do that on CELPIP. Just don't do it often if you can help it. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, good. I guess if you wanted to circle back to that another time in your speech, if it's suitable to do so, and show how that word should be used later on, if you could somehow figure that in, like the majority of the lake is shimmering in the sun as it's setting. I could come back to that towards the end of my description, and now I've demonstrated to the raters how that word should be used. That's sort of your second option. Yeah, you've got some choice there. Yeah, great question. Great question. So yeah, again, I love the word majority. She just hasn't used it quite the right way, but it was a good attempt. Let's move up to a level 8 just to kind of compare. And again, remember, we're only looking at vocab. So we're not really concerned about the listenability and the grammar and all that. So I'll play for you this woman's response, and same thing. Let's see how well she's describing the building and the boat in particular. Here we go.
It is showing a lake, beautiful, and it seems like it is a sunset. You can see a building that seems to be like a cathedral with a beautiful, beautiful dome. The skies are yellow with a little bit of blue, and at the front you can see a man that's on a Italian gondola.
And so on she goes. So in her case, I'll just quickly identify for you. So she came up with cathedral as well for the building. I think that's one word I had thought of. She also thought of the boat as being a gondola, but she's adding in an adjective, a descriptive word to tell us what type of gondola. So this is an Italian gondola. So remember in level 6, I think all we had was boat. Now we're up to Italian gondola. So you can see very quickly how much more interesting, how much more descriptive this one is too. When I look at the other words on screen here, I noticed as well that she's used the word lake for the body of water, which I think is okay. But she's also adding in some more precise words, this time that are used naturally. So words like sunset, and that building as well has a dome. So we're building a little bit of description into our picture or a painting as we go. So nice. Again, we still have simple colors. I see a little bit of blue. It's okay. It's a little bit plain. We'll look at an example coming up that will show you how to really make those colors pop as well. But this is your level 8. Level 8, by the way, signifies a good response. So you're answering your question, you're giving adequate detail, but level 8 is not quite hitting the complexity that, say, a level 9 might. So I'll play for you this level 9 response, and I hope you recognize right away just the step up in description that we're heading towards. So here's this woman's response.
It's got a really nice yellow background, and it's a painting of a sea with some boats in it, and also on the edge of the sea is like a building. It's more like a very historic monumental building, which is more like a Taj Mahal or something.
Yeah, so that to me makes sense. It was like, again, I'm sorry, the name of the mosque that you gave us, Ashwati? The Sophia, can you say it for me again?
Hi, Sophia.
Pegasus, thank you. I always forget that. I mix up the words. Anyway, similar idea here, but rather than use that actual building, we've used here the Taj Mahal. And again, one of you had that fantastic name for that type of boat that you find as well. So again, the more detail you've got, the better. The Taj Mahal is also a very famous mausoleum. It's a building that most people would know right away in your mind what it looks like. So it's perfectly fine to use these references to historical places in a painting like so. That makes sense to do so. So it's not just a building, it's an historical monumental building. So we're increasing the level of description and comparing it to the actual Taj Mahal. So that's a lot more precise, I would say, than just arguing it's a cathedral with a dome. So this is partly what level 9 vocab is going to start looking like, is you're stepping it up and being even more specific. She missed the mark a little bit on boat. I mean, that's the word she came up with, and that's fine. We'll have to leave it at that. But what else this woman starts to do at the level 9 is, again, rather than give us these one-word ideas like sunset, dome, sea, lake, she's taking a group of words and putting it into like a juxtaposition in the art world. So it's not just the sea she's looking at. She's saying that this building, this historical monumental building, is on the edge of the sea. So again, we're just getting a little more flowery or expanding our descriptions. So that's what a level 9 could look like. You ready for your level 12? You notice it's longer on screen, and this is typical. Level 12 is the highest score anybody could achieve in CELPIP speaking. So it makes sense that at the advanced level, you're going to have more vocabulary words and be able to create this description at on a bigger scale, if you will. So yes, we'll look at this man's depiction of the building and of the boat, but I also want you to examine how he tackles the colors, because up until now, we've only seen words like yellow or a little bit of blue. And I really want you to see how he expands on that even more and makes it more descriptive.
It's got mostly yellow hues, but it's also got some cooler blues in it. It's a scene. So the bottom third is a waterfront with sort of Venetian gondola type boats. And it's the midsection with the land in it is pretty thin. It's got some dome buildings that look like they've got some Eastern Mediterranean, like European Mediterranean feel to them.
And so on. All right. So when we look at, again, the boats, he also came up with gondola. I think was it our level 8 or 9? I forget who. Somebody said Italian gondola, and he's got almost the same idea. So he's making this specific to Venice, which again was my interpretation here. He's talking about the boat being a Venetian gondola type. And then the building itself, yes, he also describes it's got a dome. We've heard other people do that as well. But he's likening this to the type of architecture almost. So it's either Eastern Mediterranean or European Mediterranean. So again, all of these words are painting the picture in the mind of, I guess, Nico on this test who's listening to the description. So the main elements are captured quite well. But what impressed me, and it's not surprising it's a level 12 answer, is again, even his approach to the background elements. So it's not just yellow and blue, but it's got yellow hues and cooler blues. So we've got more imagination there. He's referring to the painting as a scene, which is comparable. I like that approach. He came up with the word waterfront, and I think one of you did that earlier too, as Ashwati was reading out some ideas. So that's creative. Waterfront's better than lake. I have to admit, I hadn't thought of waterfront, but now I wish I had. But he doesn't just leave it as the waterfront has this gondola in it. He's now chunking the painting down. So he's anchoring the scene. So the bottom third of this painting is a waterfront. And the midsection is the part that has the land with that dome building and so on. So we're just sort of, again, scaffolding our skills. So just to backtrack, when we go back to level 6, we basically have one word. It's a cathedral. It's a boat. Then when we get to level 8, it's now an Italian gondola and a boat. We get to level 9, and it's like the Taj Mahal. Now we're at level 12, and it's got Eastern Mediterranean and a European Mediterranean feel to it. And the bottom third is a waterfront and so on. So I think you can examine the progression of the language that's been used to paint this picture in the mind of Nico anyway, who is the fellow on the test that maybe will buy this painting. So it's a decent exercise in vocabulary assessment anyway. So all that's fine and well when we look at pictures and talk about words together, but I wanted to end today's episode by giving you, say, 3 or 4 strategies to help you continue your vocabulary development at home. So you've probably heard me talk about these things before. It's no mystery that people that have a stronger vocab are ones who read almost daily or regularly anyway. Because if we're not reading material and exposing ourselves to these new words, or perhaps listening to newscasts and so on, we're not giving ourselves an opportunity to even expose ourselves to new vocabulary. So we need to somehow intake that vocab, whether it's through reading or listening. Here's what I always recommend my students who are wondering about vocab. Here's what I say. Keep a vocabulary journal, but it's not as simple as just writing down all the words that you come across. I think whatever you're choosing to read, we need to choose wisely. We need to make sure we can understand about 80% of what we're reading, and maybe the other 20% is giving us new words. And with those 20% of unfamiliar words, you're going to pick and choose. I would recommend 2 or 3 words in a single reading session. You're not going to remember the new meanings of 19 words that you've just seen. The brain is going to get overloaded. So I would say pick or choose 2 or 3 of the words that you've come across, write them down in your journal before you forget what they are. You can use an online dictionary to look up the meaning of that word. Some people choose to actually write out the definition, something you could do. I think more importantly is writing out an example of a sentence that uses that word correctly, so that when you go back to your journal the next day and review what you did yesterday, you'll be able to see that word, you'll see how it's used. So that's sort of your step to gathering new words, but that alone is not going to help you remember what these words mean. I think until we actually produce the language, that's what really solidifies the vocabulary in our mind. I call it the memory bank. All up here, it's the words you've taken in and you now know how to use properly. So whatever words you're learning and writing down, make an effort to use these words, whether you're writing daily, whether you're speaking with colleagues and so on. And I'll give you an example quickly of my own development with my Spanish. I was trying to learn Spanish last year, and I took a beginner level course in Spanish. I was following these steps and keeping my journal. And I'm fortunate enough that I have some members of staff I work with who are Spanish speaking. So anytime I had to communicate with them on a project through Microsoft Teams, I would actually write out in Spanish, making an effort to use these new words from my vocabulary journal. Words I didn't know as I was typing my message, I would use an actual translator. So I would type in my English idea in the translator, and I'd see what the Spanish words are, and I would type that out into my message. So the act of taking those ideas and producing it myself, and also getting feedback from my friend. She was more than happy to sometimes correct my improper word choice and so on. So I would take note of that. So it does take practice, it takes time, but it's a good way to develop your own vocabulary as well over time. So those are sort of old hat. I think those strategies some of us might have already been doing for ourselves. But the last one I want to leave you with today, I think is incredibly helpful for your CELPIP speaking test in particular. Everybody taking the test should know exactly what these 8 speaking tasks are going to demand of you. So it's not just having magic vocabulary on test day, it's being prepared and coming into the test with a sense of the type of language that you know you're going to be asked to produce. You can do some pre-test preparation at home to be more successful on the actual spot when you're speaking. So you know for a fact, 100% of the time on CELPIP, in task 1, you're going to be role-playing and giving somebody advice. That's a given. So we have to learn that structure of task 1. So you have no way of knowing what type of advice you'll give. You can't predict the test question. But what you can and should be doing at home is thinking of maybe different transitions or expressions of language that you could use to help organize your answer as you're speaking. This happens to be a 90-second test question, by the way. We should know this before we take CELPIP. Speaking for 90 seconds requires more detail to fill the time. So if you could come in with at least 3 different transitions or signal phrases that is letting the listener know another piece of advice is coming, you've already set yourself up for success with your organization. So I've got 3 common examples on screen. You can come up with your own ideas. But if you were giving advice to somebody, you might say, if I were you, I would do. Another thing to consider is, or one piece of advice I can give you is. So again, you're setting yourself up for the structure of the response to come. So it's a little bit of a help anyway. Task 2 is always going to ask you to tell a personal experience about yourself. And when we're telling an interesting story, it's a narrative framework. We know that we're going to hopefully include some or all of these 5 W's. The who, what, where, when, and why is crucial to any story that you're telling. So again, this is going to be about something that happened in the past, so we can practice our past tense verbs. But right in the opening, whatever the test question asks you to do, think about introducing who you were with, where, and when. You can start pre-learning vocabulary in anticipation. If it's a when question, maybe you're learning words like, well, 10 years ago is a decade, right? You can look these words up online now on your online dictionary as you're studying. You can take note of them and know how to use them well, so that on test day, they're there. Because you won't have a dictionary in front of the test. But again, pre-learn some of the words in anticipation of the story that you will be telling for sure about yourself. Task 3 is always going to ask you to describe a scene. And we did a lot of work with this today when I first initially asked you to describe people. We came up with ideas like taxi cab driver and security guard and so on, and places. This is actually a picture taken from our speaking webinar that I'm sure lots of you have seen before. So for this picture, I see the word cinema, but to try to make it my own vocab, you might describe these patrons or these customers as milling about a movie theater lobby. So just being acquainted or familiar with common locations, you can pre-learn these words. You have no way of knowing what type of picture you'll be looking at, but without a doubt, you're going to have lots of people to talk about, and you have to indicate the place where they're at. So again, start learning interesting words rather than building, as I say. Is it an apartment building? Is it a bank? Is it the RBC bank, to be more precise, and so on. So pre-learn these words and have them up here ready so you can apply it to whatever picture is drawn your way. And we'll do just one more because I think I've made my point, but task 4 will give you the same picture, but this one's all about making future predictions. You know that 100%. So learn how to create a future tense verb to begin with. That's going to be half the work right there. And with your future tense actions, you're usually using the words will. So will, and then the action. In this case, maybe will walk. You could use other language like might, may, possibly, likely. So learn these words ahead of time, know how to use them well. You can also anticipate the common actions that people do in a day-to-day, because you know there's going to be a picture shown to you. Look at this picture. You can see people all over this lobby walking around. And if you say, if one of your predictions is, the couple carrying the 2 tubs of popcorn will walk to the entrance of the theater, you'd be correct and accurate, but I would argue saying that they will walk, that's a bit simple and plain. So if you're also trying to maximize vocabulary, pre-learn what are other words that you could use instead of walk. Could we say the couple holding those 2 tubs of popcorn will stroll arm in arm towards the entrance of the theater? So just making these little adjustments in your speech, and frankly in your writing too, is going to make a lot of difference for your vocabulary score for CELPIP. And as I say, there is I think one strategy to being successful on a test is, yes, know the language, it's a language test, but knowing how the test is structured and pre-learning what you're able to pre-learn before you come into the test, like knowing how to create a future tense verb, having some very strong action words in your mind and applying them suitably, that's going to really help you on test day when you're already nervous, right? Because you're answering these questions on the spot. So think about that, and or book yourself some time to look at all of the speaking tasks on the test and see what type of vocab you can already work on at home to bring into the test with you. Anyway, without further ado, I'll come back to you. Let's see if we've got any questions here. So I can X that off. I'll come back to you. Sorry, I removed myself from the scene instead of my my laptop. I apologize. But I'm back, and I'm hoping we've got some questions that I can answer for you. We'll see.
Yeah, we do. So for those of you, so if you want to, so there are a couple of questions here already, but feel free to drop more questions as they relate to this episode or the speaking test in the comments, and then we'll get to them as soon as we can. And if you cannot get to them, and if they're like something that you cannot also find the answer to on our website, then I will try to answer them in the comments, maybe after the episode, but definitely come back and check. Okay, so the first question is relating to the level 12 response. The answer is impressive in the way that he used high-level descriptive words, but he kind of pauses while describing. Still, is that a level 12?
Yeah, I honestly didn't notice any long pauses. So I think, and again, I know we focus just on vocab today, so you're asking about other parts of the rater's checklist for listening, or yeah, for speaking. So we have to remember there are those 4 categories that work together. We could have the best vocabulary ever, and if we're not demonstrating strengths in all of the other areas, we're not going to get a level 12, maybe not even a level 9, right? It's a package deal. But you're asking specifically right now about the listenability component of that checklist. This is the piece that is based upon your public speaking skills. So one of the key factors in this part of the rater's checklist is being able to speak from beginning to end with flow and rhythm, so that you're not stopping and interrupting yourself all the way through. If we pause for 5 or 6 seconds in the middle of an answer thinking, that would be a huge distraction. And yes, that would negatively affect your score. Look, thinking back to our level 12 person, I don't recall any unnaturally long pauses whatsoever. So maybe we have a different interpretation of what pausing actually means. Keep in mind that when we speak, it's customary to pause for a split second or 2 between ideas, as I've just done there. So we can't disqualify somebody for having that slight pause. It doesn't mean a weakness. I think sometimes a pause is just a way to say, I'm done talking about the boat. I'm now moving on to talk about the man on the boat, and that would be perfectly fine. So yeah. And the last thing I'd better make clear, because I hope I've not confused you just focusing on vocab today, level 12 answers are not perfect. I would be hard pressed to find any answer on a test that's perfect. There are probably always corrections we can make. It's a very common misconception that a lot of people studying for any test assume. They just assume, oh, level 12, it has to be perfect. There was an interjection there. Why is it level 12? And that's not the way the scoring goes. Again, the raters look for strengths of all of your skills. They also identify weaknesses. If the few mistakes or weaknesses that you demonstrate are minor, and they don't affect our ability to understand what you're saying. And if there are literally only a few, and you've got a wealth of strong skills upon every other quadrant of that checklist, you can still score a level 12, and oftentimes would. So it's really important that we don't penalize people drastically for making one mistake. It really is a package deal when you look at all 4 elements of that checklist. Yeah, so great question. And I hope I've given you a thorough answer there as well. Okay. What else can we answer today?
Next question. How do we avoid saying words like and, also, I also see when describing the picture and going from one object to the next?
Yes, so I am so glad you asked this question because it fits in really, really well to what we were just speaking to about learning the structure of the test. So I think this is speaking task 3 by the sounds of what you're talking about. So yes, in speaking task 3, you'll have that picture. We looked at the picture of the movie theater, and you'd have to describe the people in the scene. So I think step 1 is using basic words like, I see a couple strolling through the lobby with popcorn. And also, I see a young child holding her mother's hand. I also see, and whatnot. So we might learn that step-by-step approach first. I think it's most important to actually get your content details out correctly. So I'd say that's step 1, and that's okay. But that's, as you are indicating, it's not going to give you credit for really high-level vocabulary words. So now it's up to all of us, whether you're taking a language course with a teacher, maybe you can just Google it and find synonyms, which are words that mean the same as, or in particular, you're asking right now about conjunctions and transitions. So the word and is the most boring word in English. It's so overused. There are so many other words that would be better and more interesting. Even just words like in addition to or additionally. Likewise, that would be for similar ideas, you know, and if it's an opposite thing, maybe you're saying, on the other hand, once you're done with that, look at your directional stance. You might say, at the front of the ticket counter, one couple is purchasing tickets. To their immediate left, I see a young child holding her mother's hand. So there's just so many ways you can play around with it. And this is the part you do at home in your practice session where you've got all the time in the world, not the time to mess around with these ideas on the test itself. But yeah, I think just the pre-learning part of that, again, so I know I just talked in circles there. So step 1, learn higher level conjunctions like additionally, in addition to, there is also, you can use those words now and then really look at your direction sense. To the left of that couple is blah, 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 blah. At the front of the picture, in the background, I notice, right? So there's lots of ways you can express those ideas. I give the variety and the interest sake that the raters are looking for. So it's going to help your vocabulary, but also your sentence structure. And that's part of that same listenability section that our other person online was asking about when it comes to pausing. So great question. Lots of pre-learning you could do with that to maximize your score on the test.
Thank you, Brandy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have, so somebody asked, how do I get, sorry. Should we try to use linking words such as moreover, in addition, furthermore, and yes, you can.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that kind of piggybacks on what Saurabh was just asking about. So using linking words is going to help you create longer and more complex sentence structures. That's going to increase your score under that listenability factor of the checklist. It's also going to provide more of an organizational base. So when you're connecting all of your ideas starting from the beginning, and when you're saying additionally, another idea is furthermore, you're connecting all those ideas together. That's going to help your content and coherence. So again, you can see how all of those 4 dimensions in the checklist come together really to help you demonstrate the best of your ability on the language skill. And all those strengths observed are going to work in tandem, work together to give you the best score possible.
Okay, we have another question. Can we use words that are not in English? For instance, when we give advice about food to my friend, can I say a food name like dosa, which is a South Indian breakfast dish?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I encourage you to do that. This is actually another misconception. So I'm glad you've asked this, Gautam. A lot of people assume CELPIP is a Canadian test, which you're right, but they assume that we have to keep our ideas strictly Canadian, and that is not at all true. The main idea here is to choose words that are suitable and natural and easily understood by the listener. So if you're looking at a picture of 2 people eating something and it's clear that they're eating it, and you say, the one man is eating a dosa while his friend is purchasing whatever else the other dish happens to be, it's very clear to the listener that you're referencing the dish itself that they're eating. And dosa is a fairly common word. I mean, I love
Yeah,
dosa.
I was just gonna say, like, dosa is, I'm happy, like, if you're gonna say that dosa is not Canadian, I'm going to help you because you get really good dosa here.
We have tons of Indian restaurants and dosas factories everywhere, like all over the downtown. I go to them often, actually. Yeah. So it's a traditional Indian dish, I suppose, but yeah, most people in Canada would still know what that is, even if they've never heard of dosa. Yeah, they'll get it. They'll get when you say he's eating a dosa. So yeah, by all means, bring that language in. And it's so interesting to have a precise dish. If you just said, oh, his friend is eating something, tells us nothing. I can't picture in my mind what you're talking about. But when you say, oh, he's eating a dosa, I know you're referencing the dish itself. So yeah, please bring that language in. It's more fun. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah, same. And I haven't had breakfast.
Yeah, and Adam sort of had a follow-up question I see there at the bottom.
Oh, I don't understand this question, but I'm going to ask you, Brandy.
Sure.
I know some examinees are reciting templates. Oh, okay. That's why you may get a lot of answers with the same beginning. Good question. How do examiners evaluate those answers?
Yeah, so that is another great question. It's a little complex, so let me digest it for a moment before I answer. I know part of what I was just suggesting for strategies about pre-learning vocabulary you could use in the test. I think that's very helpful. Again, having expressions for the advice question, like another thing you could do is, or might I recommend you try? So come in with your own ideas to set your answer up, but we have to be very careful that we're not getting our hands on, sometimes on certain websites and YouTube episodes, people are selling templates for you to use, and they're promising that you're going to score very well on your test. If everybody, imagine, got that same template for whatever reason, it's the hot ticket item, and everybody uses the same template with the same expressions, and they've memorized it. And then on test day, you're in a testing room with 30 other people, and there's multiple rooms, testing rooms all over the world giving this test. So if the same wording is used time and time again, it will be flagged by security as a possible cheating or a possible plagiarism. Plagiarism is when we're copying things that don't belong to us. So again, if you're memorizing templates to use, you run the risk of having your test thrown out and disqualified if the system should notice the repetition between many different test takers who are all taking their test. So this is one of the big reasons I say don't memorize a template. Now, be that as it may, we have to, in our minds, recognize what I mean by template and what you mean by template. It might be something really different. From my perspective as a language instructor, a template is literally an answer, almost like a word for word or sentence by sentence approach from beginning to end. And I do know of students who have tried to memorize these speaking responses, we'll say, and deliver them. So that kind of a template is absurd to try to use because the answers you're memorizing are likely not going to even relate to the question on the test that you're trying to complete. So your answer won't even match the question. So that's a huge red flag that it's been memorized. And if it's flagged by security, your test is invalid, right? It's a huge problem. Rather than memorize a template, which is a scripted answer, I think if you use an outline, so I would suggest those expressions I was providing, such as giving advice. If you've got different expressions there that set up your advice giving, that's almost like an outline. It's guiding you through the organization, but the details are your own. I mean, you're giving advice. I'm sure some of us are going to have similar expressions, right? Like I might say, oh, one thing you could do, you could probably think of that yourself. So it's not uncommon for test takers to have expressions that could be the same, provided that the answer itself and the details would be slightly different. So yeah, just be very cautious when you're working with preset answers. You don't want to rely too much on what's been set. You want to make sure you're answering these questions on your own to get credit for the test and the work that you're doing. Yeah. Great questions today. Super complex too.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this. So I'll just go through, again, a question I don't understand. Okay. Does the examiner listen to practice questions and are they able to see my listening and reading score while evaluating?
No, so when you start your CELPIP test, you actually complete the listening part first and the reading part second. Those two parts of your test are scored by the computer because most of those answers are multiple choice based anyway. So the raters are the human beings that will be scoring your writing and speaking that follow. So the raters themselves have no idea what you've already done in listening and reading. It doesn't apply to them, and nobody will see that beyond the computer that gives you a score. You've got 38 scored questions for both listening and reading. So the computer will say you got whatever it is out of 38, and then you'll get your score for those two parts. So you'll know in your score report how you did, but you'll be the only one other than the computer, I guess, that gave you the score. Yeah, so it's all done anonymously. And it's different raters, by the way, too. For the writing, there's a pool of raters, at least 4 of them. And for speaking, it's a different group of raters, at least 3 of them. So these 2 hands don't know what the other ones are doing, right? It's completely separate. When they're assessing your work, it's all done anonymously anyway. So for these speaking recordings you're making, all 8 of them, so you'll get, say, whatever your speaking task 1 response is, that'll get sent off to rater number 1 over here to assess it. All they see is a barcode, and they listen to the recording you've made. They don't even see your name on that recording. They're just literally listening into an anonymous person, not knowing it's you, and they're listening to follow that checklist to give you an assessment on the strengths and weaknesses. And the same follows through for the writing. So yeah, it's done really piecemeal as a good assessment of your ability. There's no way to influence what we think about your speaking because we know how you did in writing. Those two never come together. Great question once again. And I think it's reassuring to know that it's all done bit by bit and also anonymous. It's better for you, right? In that regard, it's more fair, I would say.
Okay. So our producer already answered that question via text and I didn't read it, but you did add more about the cross, like, for lack of a better word, cross contamination of readers. So you know,
great word.
Good. I didn't know that. So good for me as well.
Yeah, no, it's good to know.
Okay. There was a question a little ahead. Okay. Is it okay to consider 2 ideas for 60-second tasks and speak 3 ideas for 90 seconds tasks? Because for tasks 3 and 8, it's a little tough to describe a picture well with 2 ideas.
Yeah, so again, there's not a set rule for how many main ideas, like the number of ideas you have to have in your response. So we'll tackle the 60-second questions here first. So it kind of depends on your style. So in a 60-second question, again, we'll take speaking task 2, asks you to tell a personal story, and it'll give you a focus. It might be like, choose a fun time you had with a family member and tell us where you went and why it was memorable. That's a practice one we do in one of my webinars. You've got 60 seconds to tell your story. So there's nobody there saying you have to have 5 ideas to fill the 60 seconds. Otherwise, the score is not going to be great. That rule doesn't exist. It's a matter of answering the question with enough detail to complete the answer, but also to make it interesting to fill the 60 seconds. And other questions where, again, you're giving advice, that one's for 90 seconds. Most of us would want to have maybe an extra detail, like an extra piece of advice to fill that 90 second of talk time. But if you're like me, who talks a lot, you might have noticed this about me. I tend to be very chatty. So if you've got always lots of detail to include, you might have fewer main ideas because you've got so much explanation to extend that thinking. You might only honestly have time for 2 ideas, even in a 90-second question, but you've got so much relevant, interesting detail to explain those ideas. Perfect. As long as, again, your vocab is suitable, it's hopefully a bit precise and interesting. You've answered the question, you don't have any grammar mistakes as you're speaking and so on. So the raters are flexible in that regard. It's really up to you. Can I use an idiom? You are in the driver's seat in this regard. It's really up to you and what your style is. But I think whichever way you practice at home, I would just be consistent coming into the test. So if you're really practicing yourself at home for having, say, 3 ideas with a level of detail, follow that. Because as you practice speaking aloud, you develop a 6th sense about what it feels like to fill 90 seconds adequately. So when you perform on test day, it's exactly the same setup. So you know what you're doing. But yeah, feel free to experiment at home. Just know which approach you'll take when you come into the test. I think is probably the best way. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, that answer has been answered. I don't think there's. Okay, I'll give you this one. How do you get 10 in all sections? What advice will you give someone who has done the test 3 times?
And all the test Are
Yeah.
probably the same. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So again, it's hard for me on the spot to say this is how you get a level 10. What maybe I can introduce to all of you to have a look at later when you've got time is on our website, which is CELPIP.ca. So that's easy to remember. When you go to at the top of the website, there's about 5 menu options, and one of them says free prep or free prep materials. So when you click there, it's going to open up this drop-down menu option. One of those options is called the score comparison chart. So when you click there, it's going to take you to the part of our website that actually has real test taker answers. So from real people from the past. So in both writing and speaking for every single level. So in your case, you're asking about level 10. So you'll want to click on level 10. You can either read the writing submission somebody put through to get a level 10, or you can listen to the recordings that they've made. So in either case, you already know they got level 10. But what's helpful here is you'll actually get a little summary from the raters themselves. These are the people that gave that score. They will identify all of the strengths and weaknesses across those 4 areas of the checklist. So remember that little chart I showed you at the beginning of our episode today. So you'll see how they did in content, vocab, their speech part, and also their task fulfillment. So that's probably the best way for you to individually really dive deeply into what level 10 is all about. Again, it's hard for me to, in a few minutes without a question in front of me, give that detail. So I would encourage you to go there. The other half of your question, I think, was if you've done the test multiple times and you're not improving your score, the best advice I can say right now is to change it up. So I don't know exactly what you have been doing to prepare. Hopefully you've taken a lot of our online webinars. I deliver 2-hour webinars monthly. We do at least 7 or 8 for CELPIP. So maybe taking a webinar like that where you've got an instructor that knows the test and other test takers to work with. Maybe if you've not tried that yet, try it. You might learn some new skills there that will push you over the edge, help you increase your score. Hope you're obviously tuning in to CELPIP Live, so that's great. I would encourage you to keep watching here. But maybe it's time to actually, if you've done all the free materials, you might actually want to splurge. Wait for a sale, maybe. Look into our online bookstore and see if there's a product there that could help you out. So again, whatever you've been doing up till now, hopefully you're scoring well enough. But if you need something different, we really need to change it up. That's what I always say. It's always Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Something about doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It doesn't work. So change it up. Try to add something new into the routine. What's that, sir?
I said I keep chips every day, hoping that one day I'll lose weight. That's not how it works.
Hoping doesn't actually work, eh?
Chips will not make me put on weight.
Exactly.
Thank you, Brandy. I think we have a few more questions, but they're more for me than they're for you. So thank you so much for joining us, Brandy. And I will just share. Somebody's asked. Okay, I'll ask last question because I think they've asked this more than once. So, what if you stutter while speaking and you're stuttering? Will that be a negative result?
Yeah, so a stutter or a stammer obviously is going to impact your ability to speak fluently from beginning to end, right? With this listenability section. So I guess the first thing I would strongly recommend you do is we do have what's called accommodations. So for people with particular needs, such as yourself in this case, I suppose, you'd want to contact customer service. There is a form to fill out. This is what you do well ahead of your test day, by the way. This is not what you do the night before your test. So I honestly forget what their time frame is. You'd have to contact them. But as soon as you can, if you know you're taking CELPIP, contact customer service. The email address is info@celpip.ca. This is a question you would ask for them. There are forms on our website that you can actually fill out. They would probably email them to you anyway. But you would need to check to see what kinds of accommodations can be put in place in that regard. If somebody is, other people might be dyslexic, so they can't read the letters in the right way and so on. So there are lots of diverse needs, and this is why accommodations exist. So again, I'm not a rater and I don't work in customer service. So I honestly don't have a precise answer about the stutter for you, but that would be your starting point, is to get a hold of them and see what types of accommodations exist. I'm hopeful they can do something, as I say. So yeah, it's a great question as well. Good. Oh, and we got to thank you. That's a nice way to end the episode.
We've got anyway, thank you so much for joining, Brandy. I'll just finish up with the other questions that are more, just general marketing and test administration related, and I will let you go. Thank you.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I just wanted to address a couple questions that Okay, so somebody asked about somebody asked about other tests. So I just want to address this question because like if you're taking this test for IRCC or the Canadian immigration process, so like if you're applying for express entry or if you're applying for PNP or any other kind of like program where you're looking to immigrate, you have multiple options to take the English language test. So how do you pick? So I think the best way to do that is to try, I think all tests provide free practice tests. I think the best way is to start doing that. So like what is your background? Like what kind of English are you familiar with? Like do you want like do you have issues with like listening and understanding different accents? So like the CELPIP test uses only North American accent, which is your usual American accent that you may be familiar with if you're like watching TV shows, like if you watched Friends or if you watched like Office or Parks and Rec, like all of these TV shows that you're familiar with, they use the North American accent. So if that's something that you're comfortable with, then you would pick the CELPIP test. So, and like, do you want, like there are many others, like would you prefer speaking, like our speaking test is you're speaking to a computer. So would you want that? Or would you prefer speaking to a real person? So that is up to you. And I would say that all I'm trying to say is like when you're making that decision, like make sure that you are making an informed decision. So try out our free practice tests. Just like without even preparing, just try our free practice test. Go through the motions and see like, is this something that I can answer? Is this question working for me? Do I want a more rigid, like, do you want like a rigid letter writing format? Does that work for you? Or do you want your speaking or your writing testing to be more casual and more everyday? Because that's what CELPIP does. So I would say that that's my suggestion. Try our practice tests and see if it doesn't work for you. Maybe you have to try another test. Or if it does work for you, maybe you pick CELPIP. But anyway, that's my answer to this question. There was another one about when will the next CELPIP Live happen. Our CELPIP Live happens every 2 weeks on Thursday. So the next CELPIP Live is going to be on the 22nd, but it's not Brandy. Brandy comes once a month. We will have like another guest. So usually we have like immigration agents or immigration lawyers who come to help like answer your questions about immigration, because we unfortunately cannot answer them for you, but we will invite people. And then sometimes we invite people who will provide like resume tips or like cover letter tips for people who are applying for jobs. So we have like different people, and we will have a guest then, and I will let you know on Instagram who our next guest will be. So you can like please follow us on Instagram, CELPIP Test Official, to stay up to date on this. But yeah, thank you. That's it. I think those are the questions. Before I say bye, I will talk about our trivia question, which was the Olympics. So the 2024 Olympics takes place in Paris this summer. Where did the Olympic Games originate? And the answer is Greece. Somebody did answer this ahead. Forgive me if I don't find it. I'm going to scroll up and see if I can find it for you. But if I cannot, it's there. And like, we know you answered it, and you answered it first. Brandy saw it too. I think Brandy commented as well that, oh, I see somebody answering. Yeah, it's here. I found it. So it's Greece. Congratulations. And thank you so much for joining us. And please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon and press like if you enjoyed it and all that good stuff. And then we'll see you again on the 22nd. Bye.